webinar will be recorded.
Oh, it is. Okay, well, fantastic. I must admit that Teams sometimes defeats me from a technological perspective. Okay, so this meeting will be recorded. Once again, it's the Advancing BC's Hydrogen Sector and Reducing Emissions via Geological Carbon Storage Opportunities. I'm Matthew, your moderator. I'm going to pass to Gord, and then the presenters will each pass back to me. I'll introduce the next presenter, and we'll do kind of a, I don't know, like a series of football handoffs, I suppose. So yes, here I'll leave the floor to Gord Klassen, and this time I shall mute myself. Gord is a councillor with the City of Fort St. John, and you can see his presentation title there. Take it away, George. Gord. Oh, Gord, are you possibly muted by accident there?
How am I now?
All good. All good.
Okay, sometimes I'm better muted, but we'll try it with some sound. So yeah, I'm Gord Klassen, councillor in City of Fort St. John. I've been councillor here since 2011. And I was just saying that somehow my technology didn't work, so I can't have my slides on my own laptop here. So I'm trusting someone on the other end to advance them when I let you know it's time. But yeah, so thank you again for having me as part of this webinar today. I'm a little bit probably a little off of where all the other presenters are, but I just want to talk a little bit about our community and how this whole transition to this new industry and opportunities is going to affect a city like ours. But first, I'd like to just take the opportunity to recognize that I am here on the traditional territory of the Denizah, signatories to the Treaty 8 and the Métis Nation BC Region 7. We value the significant contributions of Indigenous peoples who have lived and worked on the land for time immemorial and are committed to meaningful reconciliation. And as I said, I'm a bit intimidated today to be presenting along with these other guests who are obviously very intelligent and knowledgeable about the subject matter of today's webinar. And I'm also aware that as a politician, I'm quite capable of speaking for a very long time and not really saying a whole lot. So I will do my best to relate my comments to the subject at hand. My hope is, as I said, just to provide a bit of context to illustrate the value of this work for our region and in our region, and how we, in fact, already are currently incorporating innovation and investing in our own operations to address the challenges of climate change and to create efficiencies and economic benefits for our organization and for the residents of our community. We're very excited about the potential of this developing industry and its benefit to our climate, as well as the opportunities that it presents for economic diversity in our region. So just to tell you a little bit about our community. So if we can go to slide 2. Fort St. John is working hard to create a community that people can be proud to call home. We've invested heavily in our downtown revitalization projects. You can see some of that work. Of course, if you haven't been here before, you won't realize that that's a great improvement from what it was a few years ago. But we continue to work on road and utility upgrades, new and improved parks and recreational facilities. We have great employment opportunities, affordable housing, and really limitless indoor and outdoor recreational possibilities. Next slide, please. We are home to over 21,000 residents, so not a big city, but a good-sized city. And that is an increase of almost 6% over the last census period. So it's not bad. The growth continues at a steady pace. We're second in the province in median household income at $106,000 and have the youngest median age in BC at 34 years old. Fort St. John had the largest increase in the province of visible minorities during the last census period, with almost 1 in 6 residents identifying as a visible minority. Next slide. And for those who don't know, Fort St. John is located in the breathtaking BC Peace River country. We were just talking about that earlier, and it sort of stretches across to Grand Prairie and north of there. But we are the major economic hub in northeast BC. We're at the beginning of the Alaska Highway. We're a 2-hour drive from Grand Prairie, Alberta, 5-hour drive from Prince George, BC, if you know where that is. We are also just a 2-hour flight from both Calgary, Alberta, and Vancouver, BC. We are located on established rail connections and have relatively close proximity to ports in Kitimat, Prince Rupert, and Stewart. Next slide. The Northeast, as I said, is really a powerhouse of economic activity, including over $8.9 billion in energy exports in 2019, along with 38% of the province's hydroelectric power coming from our area. Currently, the region's unemployment rate sits just above 6%, and the median selling price of a single-family home is just under $400,000. Last year, building permits issued reached over 30 million within our city, and it takes an average of 3 to 6 months, something like that, for new construction approvals. So we continue to have things going on here. Next slide. There are several recent investments in the Fort St. John area, including the Site C Dam, the clean energy project, which is scheduled to be in service in the next couple of years and able to provide a lot more electric power to our province and other areas of the country, and in fact down into the States. We also have the Landing, which is a multi-phase retail development anchored by a 126,000 square foot Canadian Tire store, and a new Parkwood development, which is a 600-acre mixed-use master plan community. So a lot of stuff going on. Next slide. The city of Fort St. John has also made significant investments in our community to improve municipal operation efficiencies. And one of those projects is what you see there on the screen. It's the recently completed new RCMP detachment. And it was built using mass timber products, including BC-sourced nail laminated timber wood decking. To meet net zero standards, the building features a 145 kilowatt photovoltaic system and an improved insulation and windows to reduce energy loss. And those improvements should represent an operational savings of over $60,000 annually, not to mention its reduced carbon footprint. Next slide. In 2016, a micro-hydro project was built downhill from the city's wastewater treatment facility near the Peace River. So as our wastewater is gravity fed, after it's been treated, it's gravity fed back to the Peace River, and along that route and from a gravity fed discharge pipe, it creates over 700 megawatt hours of power each year, which is enough to power 70 homes. So that's just a little thing that we're trying to do to increase, again, our economic viability and sustainability, but also to just do what we can to provide power to the grid and to our own community. Next slide. We've also made several upgrades to our recreation facilities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and operating costs. Those projects include upgrades to the lighting and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems in our 2 ice facility buildings, allowing for more efficient ice plant and building operations. We also purchased 2 new electric ice resurfacers. All combined, these projects represent a reduction of over 600 tons of carbon dioxide emission. Just one thing, and you can see it in the slide, you probably can't tell what it is, but just a side note, we have one of only 4 indoor Olympic-sized speed skating ovals, certified Olympic speed skating ovals indoor, and it's actually on the 2nd level of this ice facility. In North America. It's one of 4 in North America. So if you ever want to come and get in your speed skating practice, you're certainly welcome to come and join us here. Back to the climate action and what we're trying to do there. We are a signatory to the BC Climate Action Charter, which is a voluntary agreement between the BC government, the Union of BC Municipalities, and the city to act on climate change. And this includes carbon neutrality in corporate operations, measuring and reporting on our greenhouse gas emissions, and creating a more energy efficient community. Next slide. Fort St. John continues to lead the way by implementing innovative solutions for municipal operations, and then we like to share that knowledge and experience with other local governments for their benefit, and some of them come and take tours of what we're doing, and are able to take that information and knowledge home with them and incorporate it into their operations. Our recently adopted 5-year economic development strategy and economic development department are working hard at this point and continue, have been for a long time, but continue to work hard to attract new businesses and investments to our region and specifically to our city. And of course, we continue to advocate to higher levels of government to promote various energy forms. And I guess that's partly where this webinar comes in, and some of the work that we're doing to get the province on board and get them supporting some of these other energy forms and exploration and development. Next slide. And this, I guess this really brings it maybe closer to where we're at with this webinar, but just want to state that we do have a considerable advantage in our area, in our city, as we move into a low carbon future. This starts with our local education providers who meet the specialized, unique needs of our workforce. One example is our Northern Opportunities program, which is a dual credit program where our local Northern Lights College partners with local secondary schools to provide trades training to high school students. So by the time they're out of high school, they're about halfway through their apprenticeships and are able to move on into industry and other areas. As well, our residents and business owners have decades of experience with the evolving oil and gas and forestry and agriculture and mining industries, and are ready to tackle the new opportunities and challenges of a low carbon future. Collectively, we can build a sustainable future. Next slide. As the next presenters are going to share, Northeast BC is ripe for new opportunities. We have an abundance of natural resources and the potential for hydrogen production. Our geological features provide significant opportunities for carbon capture solutions. And we are close to international markets, as I said earlier, to have a global impact. And final slide, I think, maybe. Yes, as I said at the outset, we're excited for you to join us in shaping a sustainable future. And again, thank you for having us as part of this webinar. And I look forward to hearing from the rest of the crew today. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much there, Gord. I guess the thing that stands out the most, everything's important, but your comment on the police station, the police department having a net zero building was fascinating, not just because it's Fort St. John. I think in about the year 2008, so 15 years ago, we had the very first net zero houses being built in a couple cities around Canada. And so it's very cool to see that in 15 years, not every building is net zero, but there's so much that we can do, and there's so much scale up of activity. And maybe that's a half decent segue to our next speakers, Gavin Durham, the president and CEO of Geoscience BC, as well as Randy Hughes, the manager for energy and water. Again, this is something where we can see a technology that, as the permitting and regulations come into place, we will be able to scale them up for the benefit of, again, growing jobs while shrinking emissions. And so I will pass it over to them. Gavin and Randy, please make sure to unmute yourselves and take it away.
All right, thank you, Matthew. Thank you to Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association for co-hosting this with us and City of Fort St. John, the BC Energy Regulator. I do want to also recognize Gord Klassen and the team there at Fort St. John. Tremendous hard work and effort there to diversify your economy for the future. And also want to thank you for your support and partnership with Geoscience BC for not just a little while, but for many years now. So thank you, Gord. So yes, I am Gavin Durham, the President and CEO of Geoscience BC, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you here from the city of Vancouver, the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. I also want to acknowledge and honor essentially that our geoscience research does take place on the territories of many nations across this province, and we're very grateful for those opportunities. Before we dive into the detail, moving to slide 2, let me give you a little bit of background about Geoscience BC. Our research is essentially the first link in the supply chain for Canada's net zero emissions economy. We are a not-for-profit society that was established in 2005 to generate and publicly share high quality and independent earth science research and data. Our mission really is to drive economic development and to stimulate innovation and attract investment. We focus on critical minerals and metals, on cleaner energy and water, and on geological carbon capture and storage projects to help achieve net zero emission goals. Next slide, please. Our research is funded by industry, governments, trusts, and many other partners. And through these partnerships, Geoscience BC co-funds and administers the research, which is peer-reviewed and available to the public on our website. Collaboration is very important to our work, and we strive to build technical capacity and advance reconciliation through geoscience. We take a holistic approach to what we do. We work closely with governments and communities, Indigenous groups, resource sectors, and academia. To support and build on this collaborative model, we launched Geoscience BC membership in January of 2022. And happy to say we now have over 170 corporate members, individual members, student and associate members. Some of them, including the City of Fort St. John and the Canadian Hydrogen Association, are here today, and thank you again for that support. The Geoscience BC model is backed by strong volunteer-driven governance. This includes an independent board of directors and a new Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation Advisory Council, which we're very proud of and happy to mention here today, as well as importantly, 3 expert technical advisory committees, many of which are present on this call just now. And one reminder, of course, if your company, organization, or community has yet to sign up to join Geoscience BC, please consider doing so, so you can stay up to date on our research and provide your input on future projects. So thank you. Moving to slide 4, please. So how does this all fit into hydrogen development? Well, 2 of our focus areas are geological carbon capture and storage and geothermal energy research. These both help to support and guide and advance the development of BC's hydrogen sector. Our recent and current and upcoming geoscience projects provide the information and the data to identify and to quantify and to assess the hydrogen development opportunities. A couple of quick examples. So for geological carbon capture and storage, this could be in the sedimentary basins. It could be through carbon mineralization. And for geothermal energy, 2 examples of our projects include the Fort Nelson First Nations Tutica geothermal project and Meager Creek Development Corporation's hydrogen development project, which could produce zero emission power. Slide 5, please. I think now it's a good place for me to hand over to Geoscience BC's manager of our energy and water projects, Randy Hughes. So over to you, Randy, to take it away. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Gavin, and welcome everyone. So as Gavin mentioned, I'm Randy Hughes. I'm the manager, energy and water for Geoscience BC. And at Geoscience BC, so we understand that geoscience research is important to support and help guide decision-making and development of clean energy initiatives, including hydrogen projects, and our research in carbon capture and storage and geothermal energy helps provide that critical science. We know that some hydrogen production methods generate carbon dioxide or CO2 as a byproduct, and that having carbon storage available is an option to safely store these emissions. Our projects provide information that is needed to identify, assess, and quantify carbon storage potential in subsurface zones and sedimentary basins and through carbon mineralization. Geothermal energy can provide power to generate hydrogen, and our geothermal research has guided investment decisions by First Nations and the clean energy industry. I'm going to give a brief overview of some of Geoscience BC's recently completed and current projects that relate to carbon capture and storage and geothermal. As well, I'm going to talk about some of our project concepts in those research areas. So first slide I'm going to talk about, so for recently completed and current projects, our Northeast BC Geological Carbon Capture and Storage Atlas project. And by geological storage for this project, we mean the storage of CO2 at depth, primarily as a supercritical liquid. This project was undertaken by Canadian Discovery Limited, was completed in January of this year. The report, maps, and database are all available on our website. The project was funded by the BC Hydrogen Office of the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation through the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy. And the project identified, assessed, and ranked depleted gas pools and deep saline aquifers in Northeast BC for storage potential of CO2. Next slide, please. Okay, the study identified 4.2 gigatons of CO2 storage potential, which is quite a bit of potential, across 12 subsurface zones. The map on the right shows stacked deep aquifer storage potential, with the yellow to red colors showing high capacity areas, in particular near Fort St. John and to the south of Fort Nelson. The map on the left is a summary map of depleted gas pools that are color-coded by storage potential volume, and there's a concentration of depleted pools in the Fort St. John area with greater than 25 megatons potential. The report and maps go into much more detail for each formation, and this project provides a template of what we would like to do for other sedimentary basins in British Columbia. Next slide, please. For geothermal, Geoscience BC to date has focused on areas with the highest potential for geothermal electrical generation. The map on the right is a heat flow map of BC with red and pink highlighted areas having the highest geothermal energy potential. As Gavin mentioned, at Clark Lake in Northeast BC, our early research guided the Fort Nelson First Nation to proceed with the Tude Ka electrical generation project. And at Mount Meagher in the southwest BC Garibaldi volcanic belt, our research has helped drive Mount Meagher Development Corporation's low carbon hydrogen generation project at the Mount Meagher site. We continue to look for new high temperature as well as direct use geothermal projects in BC, particularly in the northwest, Nechako, and southeast areas of the province where there's hot springs and volcanoes. But we're also seeing interest in research in the lower mainland area of BC. Next slide, please. Okay, next project I'm going to talk about is carbon mineralization research we've supported at the University of British Columbia. The carbon mineralization is a naturally occurring chemical reaction when CO2 comes in contact with mafic to ultramafic rocks. The chemical reaction uses CO2 to generate magnesium carbonate minerals in the host rock that, once they're formed, provide a stable and permanent form of CO2 storage. Geoscience BC's current project, Carbon Mineralization Potential Assessment of British Columbia, has been led by Dr. Greg Dipple at the University of British Columbia. The research is using existing public geoscience data sets to map and assess serpentinized ultramafic rock bodies in the province. The project is showing that there are potentially large volumes of shallow bedrock in BC that could be suitable for CO2 mineralization, either through mining the rock and exposing it to CO2 or through injecting CO2 underground. Injection technology has been tested in Iceland in basaltic rocks, and our next step is to develop a pilot project to test this technology at field scale in ultramafic rocks, and I'll talk more about that in a second in our project concept section. So with that, I'll move now to our project concepts and talk about 3 of the carbon capture and storage projects that we're working on. Also, I'll note that our concepts are in early stages and that we're looking for partners to collaborate with, to provide project guidance, and to provide project funding. And Gavin will say just a little bit more about that at the end of our presentation. The first concept is pilot scale carbon capture and storage in ultramafic rocks. This is a follow-up to our carbon mineralization assessment I just talked about. This project utilizes learnings from UBC's CarbMin Lab and other world-leading expertise to test CCS in ultramafic rocks. In this phase, we are designing and assessing the feasibility of a pilot-scale CO2 injection test into a single well, and we are seeing interest in this project from industry as well as provincial and federal governments. Next slide, please. Our next concept is for Southwest BC Geological Carbon Capture and Storage Atlas, similar to what we produced for Northeast BC. And we're in discussions with several entities for research collaboration on this. The map on the right is the portion of the Georgia Sedimentary Basin in the lower mainland area of BC that this first phase project would focus on, and other potential phases in the larger Georgia Sedimentary Basin. The project would provide fundamental geoscience to understand the technical potential to sequester CO2 in deep saline aquifers in this region. There's also interest in understanding the geothermal potential of this region. The BC Lower Mainland area has major greenhouse gas emission sites. So understanding the potential for deep CO2 sequestration in this area, it'll help inform decision-making by multiple entities, and carbon capture and storage potential in this area could be beneficial for some hydrogen projects close to the largest population center in the province. Next slide, please. The final CCS concept I'm going to talk about is our Central Interior BC Geological Atlas concept, focusing on the large, very large, actually 75,000 square kilometer Nechako Basin, which is shown in green on the map, and is the closest sedimentary basin to Prince George and the hydrogen projects that are planned there. The project would focus on gathering existing technical data and assessing that data for carbon capture and storage potential, which may assist hydrogen project development in central BC. We're developing a network of collaborative partners, including the City of Prince George, First Nations Climate Initiative, BC Energy Regulator, and the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. So I know that was a quick run through several of our projects, but thank you. And with that, I'll hand it back to Gavin for a few comments.
Excellent. Thank you, Randy. Very concise job. Well done. So I just want to emphasize the partnerships and the collaborative model that we have here at Geoscience BC. We can't do the work without your support. As Randy indicated, we have a number of partners coming together in different projects throughout the province of British Columbia. However, we really do need that critical mass in order to make a final decision as a board of directors to proceed on these projects. So I really encourage you to connect with us at either through geosciencebc.com or us directly in order to have those discussions about where you could contribute and leverage your contributions, be part of the research, which I think is super exciting and very much needed, and help us move this forward. So with that, I know we have the BC Energy Regulator up next with Ken Howe, and just want to thank them as well for being terrific technical partners and collaborators. We can't do, again, any of this work without very much a collaborative model of support and working together on these very important challenges and making sure that science and data and technology and ultimately engineering drives the solutions of the future. So again, thank you very much to the partners, and I'll turn it back over to our facilitator, Matthew.
All right. Yes, thank you very much, Gavin and Randy. I do want to belatedly also acknowledge that CHFCA in the Metro Vancouver region, we are situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish nations. So thank you to our first two presenters for the prompt reminder there to do that. Our third, I guess technically our fourth speaker for our third session today will be Ken Howe, as a Director of Major Projects and Energy Transition for the BC Energy Regulator. So I just want to turn it over to him, and he'll be speaking to the approach the organization is taking in terms of supporting the low carbon economy. Ken?
Yeah, thanks very much, Matthew. And thanks very much also to Geoscience BC for the invitation to present this morning. I'll just start sharing my screen here. And maybe I'll get a confirmation that you can see that presentation. Okay, great. Thanks very much. As Matthew mentioned, my name is Ken Howe, and I'm the Director for major projects and energy transition with the BC Energy Regulator. And that's my own slide here. And you just take a moment to acknowledge we do, our work does span many traditional territories. So we acknowledge and respect the many Indigenous territories and treaty areas, each with unique cultures, languages, legal traditions, and relationships to the land and water, which the BC Energy Regulator's work spans. We also respectfully acknowledge the Métis and Inuit peoples living across British Columbia. My presentation today, I'm going to sort of thread in a number of key themes here. One of which is providing a bit of an overview of our newly expanded regulatory mandate and how that supports energy transition. I'll talk about some of the main sources of GHG emissions from the oil and gas industry in British Columbia, and then talk about the role of geologic carbon storage and how it all weaves together and is supported by our current regulatory regime. So as some of you may have noted, we have recently gone through a name change. We were previously known as the BC Oil and Gas Commission, now known as the BC Energy Regulator, or BCER. Along with that, a new legislation, the Energy Resource Activities Act, or ERA, which has replaced the former Oil and Gas Activities Act, or OGA. And those changes took effect, the name change took effect in February this year. And the Energy Resource Activities Act came into effect, or rather the expanded mandate aspects of the legislation came into force on September 1st, so very recent. So the ERA, I'll just talk a little bit about our Energy Resource Activities Act. It's an expanded regulatory mandate that allows us now to regulate hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol production, as well as an expanded regulatory role with respect to carbon capture and storage. BCER is currently in the consulting stage with existing hydrogen production operators, as well as proponents of proposed hydrogen and ammonia production projects. In the interim, our existing overarching regulatory objectives, such as the protection of public safety and the environment, reflected in our current permit conditions, will guide our approach as we fully flesh out and implement ERA and its associated regulations over the next 3 years. And this is all part of our strategic plan to support clean energy transition. This diagram here is just a way to illustrate green hydrogen and ammonia production. So you'll see based on the arrows that we've got, in this case, renewable energy. That's what would make it green hydrogen production. So that could come from solar, wind, hydroelectric power, as well as geothermal. So what this process illustrates is the manufacturing of hydrogen and ammonia through a process known as electrolysis, whereby demineralized water is introduced to an electrolyzer to split hydrogen and oxygen molecules. When combined with nitrogen, hydrogen becomes ammonia, which can be then transported by rail and shipped to domestic and export markets, where it can be utilized as fertilizer and for other uses, but maybe more importantly, as an energy resource, where it's converted back to hydrogen and utilized as a source of clean energy. again, hydrogen is the simplest, lightest, and most abundant chemical element on Earth and the universe. It's contained in water, plants, animals, and humans. It can be produced, as the previous diagram illustrated, from water by using either renewable energy sources, fossil fuels, or biomass, and can be used as an energy carrier. So there's different colors of hydrogen that you'll hear about. And for purposes of today's discussion, I'll focus a little bit more on the green and the blue hydrogen. So green hydrogen, as I explained previously, utilizes the renewable sources of energy to fuel or to as feed to the electrolysis process. Blue hydrogen is a process where steam methane reforming, or SMR, or also known as autothermal reforming, or ATR, use natural gas as a feedstock. And importantly, here is where carbon capture and storage can be implemented within this process to produce or to reduce rather carbon dioxide emissions from the process. I spoke a little bit earlier about ammonia as a compound of hydrogen and nitrogen. It's produced naturally in the environment and can be used as a carrier for energy. It's also used as a refrigerant gas in fertilizer and purification of water supplies and some other industrial processes. So it's quite a valuable commodity in and of itself. Briefly touch on some of the main sources of GHG emissions in the oil and gas sector in British Columbia, and these figures are from 2020, as you see. So the majority, obviously, 78.6% of GHG emissions is constituted by carbon dioxide, and then 21% methane, and a much smaller portion of other gases. Touching a little bit on net zero. It's a term that we hear used more and more often these days, achieving net zero. So this diagram just kind of illustrates some of the inputs and the calculations to arrive at net zero emissions. And importantly here is the role of carbon capture and sequestration in reducing those carbon as a way to reduce the overall carbon emissions to atmosphere. This is a really cool slide. This shows the geography where the geologic storage can be utilized. The top of this illustration is a facility. It's obviously producing emissions, and the figure shows you just like how deep and the kind of appropriate geologic reservoirs and context suitable for geologic sequestration. So as you can note, the geological formations where carbon dioxide is injected are very deep. And these formations, from a regulatory perspective, would have to have three main characteristics, and that is capacity, injectivity, and containment. We as regulators would ask, is there enough capacity in a given reservoir to store large volumes of carbon dioxide? Is there good injectivity to match the expected rate of injection? And will there be safe containment to avoid any leakage of CO2 back to the surface? The Petroleum and Natural Gas Act, in combination with the Energy Resource Activities Act, enable the development or use of storage reservoirs in BC. So there's different types of storage reservoirs, and that can include salt caverns, mines, aquifers, depleted reservoirs, and hard rock caverns. And Randy, in his presentation, had touched on some of the information regarding suitable sedimentary basins for carbon capture and storage. You'll see here, similar to Randy's presentation, where we've got some information, we've got some really good information in some areas of British Columbia, where we host numerous sedimentary basins with a range of suitability for CCS projects. We do have a large body of knowledge for the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, which is located in the northeast of British Columbia. And that's largely due to the wells that have been drilled over the years for oil and gas development. Other basins clearly will require some further study to properly evaluate their suitability for carbon capture and storage activities. The CCS injection, as close as possible to the point of capture, is key to a viable project. And so that is one advantage we have in terms of gas processing facilities, for example, in the Northeast, where we've got some of the best, if not the best, reservoir locations. So just to summarize, some of our advantages and benefits of our regulatory framework, as well as our knowledge and technical expertise here in British Columbia. So in terms of incentivizing industry to promote the development of carbon capture and storage, the Canadian government has recognized British Columbia as having policies and regulations in place to effectively manage CCS in the province. And again, enabling projects to qualify for the federal CCUS investment tax credit. The BCER has extensive regulatory experience with similar projects and has identified significant CO2 geologic storage capacity, as illustrated on the previous slide. The provincial government and the BCER has and will continue to work together with academia, researchers, First Nations, local governments, standards organizations, and industry to ensure that CCS projects occur in a responsible manner. Initial projects are expected to be of modest scale, based on point source emissions in known geologically favorable areas that do not require significant pipelines for the transport of CO2. Research and development work on new CCS technology is ongoing worldwide, not just here in BC, but all over the world, to foster this method of mitigating climate change and supporting climate change adaptation. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Again, I'd like to thank Geoscience BC very much for the opportunity to present to you today.
Super. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ken, and on behalf of the BC Energy Regulator for that really interesting lens of the world from the regulatory standpoint. I just want to encourage folks, we do have about 13 minutes left. And so if you do have questions, immediate questions for our guests, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Little icon there on the Teams window. Maybe I'll kick off and just going back to Gord, seeing as he was our first speaker. Could you speak to maybe how the city of Fort St. John might facilitate or make possible businesses or investors developing initiatives in the city, in the region?
Yeah, generally, as I said earlier, we're certainly working hard to attract that investment and further development in the city and in our region. So we're actively encouraging businesses and investors to participate in these development initiatives. Our region is a terrific fit for a variety of investment opportunities in various sectors, including renewable energy projects, sustainable construction, as I talked about earlier, the green technology development, Local businesses here are supported by a strong Chamber of Commerce, which really helps further increasing collaboration with local education providers to drive innovation and research in sustainable practices. So these providers, they've got various programs specifically designed to equip local workforce with the skills needed for jobs in low carbon world, making it an attractive location for businesses in the sustainability sector.
Sorry, I muted myself there. Okay, yes, thank you very much, Gord. All right, maybe just passing on to our middle two speakers, Gavin and Randy. So it was very interesting to see the different areas in which we could do development in BC. It is striking, like I know mathematically that BC is bigger than France and Germany combined, but one does forget just how big it is until one's reminded of just the vastness that we have. If you guys could like get greenlit or advance one project concept, like on an accelerated track, which of those options would you guys choose, and for what reason?
Well, I'll say good try, Matthew, but we're not going to be able to pick favorites here today. But I think what's important is identifying where these opportunities lie, and making sure that's available to industry and to governments and to nations and investors, so that there's really clear information available. So if they're looking at a geological carbon capture and storage option, if they're wondering if there ones that exists, that our job in conjunction with the partners and the province is to ideally create a geological carbon capture storage atlas, so that if you're in any town or any community, any region in British Columbia, that ultimately you'll be able to turn to that information and help inform your own decisions in a very educated way. So we wouldn't want to call favorites at this point. Clearly there's some work that's already advanced, which is excellent, and that may logically make sense as the next step of undertakings. But I think I'll leave it there, unless Randy, you want to add a bit of color to that.
No, it's a good comment, Gavin. I'll just mention that that's one of the advantages of membership in Geoscience BC, is that your voice is heard directly. So if there is emphasis from members and specific entities, that voice is heard, and the greater emphasis on one area helps drive research to that particular area, perhaps a little sooner than others. But it's a great vehicle for input and say in the research that we do. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. The comment about having an atlas makes me think of an anecdote. Might be true, might not be true. One of my mining friends once said that I guess Sweden, a fairly small country, had the government do some exploratory just drilling, what minerals are where at like 50-kilometer intervals or something as a grid, and how that actually helped accelerate development of these deposits, because there was an atlas, or there was sort of a guideline of what is where, which reduced the risk maybe for businesses to be like, okay, maybe it's worth trying to develop something. So yeah, very useful to have those censuses, those atlases. Okay, so I guess turning over to Ken then. Now, the regulation of carbon capture and storage, or maybe underground sequestration, still a relatively new field here. Maybe this might be an easy question because there aren't that many other jurisdictions with regulations in place. But how does the BCER's framework or the regime compare with other jurisdictions in terms of are we benchmarking stringent practices, things like that?
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Matthew. So I will note that British Columbia, along with other provinces such as Alberta, Saskatchewan, are part of the standards committee. So that's the CSAZ 741 standard that applies to carbon capture and storage. So while, you know, a CCS proponent would likely see very similar kinds of considerations, such as the ones I outlined in my presentation regarding suitable geologic storage reservoirs, and similar permit conditions likely. The knowledge is growing in British Columbia, and so while we're probably looking at, you know, currently, I'll take, for example, in Alberta, the Quest project, which has quite rigorous requirements. But building on our continuing understanding and knowledge of carbon capture and storage, I think what we can expect is that the requirements will start to become more site-specific, so appropriate to particular projects. And this is where we're going to continue to learn as this sector continues to develop in British Columbia, as well as learning from other jurisdictions.
All right, yeah, thanks, Ken. So we do have a couple questions here. First, from a David Poe. I hope I'm pronounced the last name correctly. And this might be a Gavin Randy question, perhaps. What information do we have to understand life or chemical reactions that may occur in deep wells where carbon, like a CO2 injection, is proposed? Could the injections exceed rates of reaction that are occurring below? I guess this might be on the mineralization side. And do we know about these deep wells to do this at, you know, at scale, at capacity?
Yeah, I'll comment that's a good, you know, it's a good question, and so the Northeast BC Carbon Capture and Storage Atlas, that was our, you know, we call it phase 1. The you know, the initiative for that, or the objective of that, was to identify you know, depleted gas pools and you know, deep saline aquifers that had the capacity, and to indicate the, you know, the metrics around that. But it's understood that, you know, additional research is required that looks into the various rates and reactions. You know, those that occur within aquifers are slightly different than those that occur within depleted gas pools. But it is very much you know, an important part, and does need further research. And that's why, you know, once, you know, and what we tried to do in the Atlas, and what we did in the Atlas, was to rank and quantify the potential storage capacity, and then it's up to you know, further engineering and research work to take those and then understand you know, in more detailed engineering and you know, scientific analysis, what are the effects of the you know, of the ejection, what are the chemical reactions and things like that. So long answer short is that, you know, still more work to be done, but on a site-specific basis, you know, that does need to be done. And I know on the carbon mineralization side, that's one of the you know, fundamental questions for the research, and the reason for the pilot project is, you know, how, you know, once you start this you know, carbon mineralization, right, how quickly does it, I mean, the reaction occurs very quickly, but, you know, what are the effects of that near injection precipitation of carbon mineralization minerals, and how does that affect you know, through time? So hopefully that answers the question.
Got it. Okay. We do have a question from Ryan Lemiski. I believe, if I can sort of summarize it, everyone can see it in the chat. It sounds like the geology, perhaps in the Montney region, might not lend itself to lower risk proximal sites. And so I think it was a question ultimately about would the BC government be open to developing hubs, maybe, where you can an operator can explore maybe a bigger region to help meet its requirements. I suppose that might be a Ken question, maybe, since that's a regulatory verging on side thing.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew, and thanks, Ryan. I'm probably not best positioned to respond to this, but it's a very good question. It's a interesting thought. the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation is responsible under the Petroleum and Natural Gas Act for tenuring of the reservoirs. So I would see this being a really good question for my colleagues at the ministry. So apologies that I can't really, shed more light on that particular option, but certainly, I mean, here's one of the great benefits of presentations like this, where we get to collaborate, and that collaboration is likely going to lead to innovation and new ideas. So certainly appreciate the question.
Super. And we actually have time for this. So Debbie had put in another question here, expanding on the difference between carbon mineralization and geological storage sequestration, which has most potential? Maybe Randy, that might be a you thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll just, on the previous question, I'll just comment that, one of the things we did in the Northeast BC Atlas was, and I showed you some of those summary maps that were like, for example, the stacked aquifers and the color-coded depleted gas pools. They identified, particularly in that Fort St. John region, areas where there's significant stacked potential, both in the aquifers and depleted pools, and that lends itself to the hub model, if you will, for carbon capture and storage. So difference
I might just
between
quickly add, Randy, to that.
Just don't forget it's time, so please just be mindful to try and.
Yep, and the rocks are different in different regions, so I think that's an important comment. So, the rocks in Northeast BC are different than Central BC and Southwest BC. So we just have to work with the rocks that are in the region, and carbon mineralization generally does not occur in the same areas where the sedimentary basins are. There are a couple of unique areas, but generally that's not the case. So different options, different rocks for different parts of the region.
Got it. Kind of like how I don't know, different sports have different parts of the year that they play in, kind of, Okay. Yeah. All right. So thanks all. Thanks for putting up with all my analogies. We're just over time, but I did want to again thank our speakers, Gord, Ken, Randy, and Gavin, and our supporters for this CHFCA, Geoscience BC, City of Fort St. John, and the BC Energy Regulator. Thank you all for attending. If you have follow-up questions that you want to get answered, please feel free to send them to, I guess, the email address here, and then we'll try and direct them to the appropriate authorities. So thank you all so very much, and hope you're not late for a meeting here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.